here's the story I want to talk to you about. The ACLU, it is not weird for the American Civil Liberties Union to defend conservative groups on issues of free speech and the First Amendment. They've done this a long time. Like the ACLU proudly says, we defend freedom of speech, and that includes speech a lot of people might find offensive. So if like a neo-Nazi group or the KKK want to stage a protest or a peaceful rally in a heavily Jewish area, they have argued, we don't like this, but they have the right to have a rally or something like that. So the ACLU, for all of its flaws, is fairly principled on this matter. If it's a freedom of speech issue, they want to defend it. Okay, fine. I'm okay with that. By the way, I'm a due-paying member of the ACLU. I appreciate what they do. So it is not weird to me that they just announced this lawsuit about a Christian ad on the buses in Washington, D.C. This is the headline I will share with you on the press release that they put out. It says, lawsuit challenges D.C. Transit Authority for violating the First Amendment. And it's important to talk about what the challenge is here. And the first thing I'll show you is this. This is the ad that they are talking about, because it's important for you to know which ad we are actually referring to here. Here we go. So this is the ad. I know my face is in the way here. Let's try that. It's a sign that says Christian, and underneath it says, to find out about the faith of our founders, go to wallbuilders.com. And that's George Washington kneeling in prayer. That's a painting, obviously, because that never happened. But okay, that's the ad. And the company, Wall Builders, behind this ad asked the Washington, what was it called? The Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. They said, we want this ad on buses. There's also one more ad just like it that I will show you. Same idea here. This is like a picture of the founders writing the Constitution, I assume, but it's the same text. So they wanted those two signs to go on buses in Washington, D.C. And basically, the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, the WMATA, they said no. They rejected the ads on the grounds that they violate the company's rules. And what are the rules? The rules prohibit any advertising that is basically advocacy. They don't allow political ads. They don't allow like promotion of religion ads. And they don't allow advocacy ads trying to sway members of the public on issues where there might be a lot of opinion. And so they said this is advocacy. Not necessarily promotion of religion, because it's not, but it's advocacy, so they said no. And the ACLU is saying you made the wrong decision there. That's a government entity. You can't say no on the basis of advocacy when you allow other ads to go up. And the ACLU actually pointed out in their lawsuit that you have actually allowed other groups to put up ads as well. I'm looking for specifically, they said, you have allowed an advertisement promoting the Book of Mormon musical, which is a spoof of the actual Mormon church, right? Isn't that advocacy or religion? They've also allowed something about putting term limits on Supreme Court justices. There was an ad calling for term limits, and that ad was allowed to go up on buses. And that's advocacy as well. So the ACLU is saying you allowed those. So why are you rejecting this? You can't do it. You got to play by the rules. So we're filing a lawsuit because you can't reject this ad. And I just want to say, on principle, that's the correct move by the ACLU. I agree. If the WMATA is allowing advocacy ads in some cases, they don't get to pick and choose. They got to follow their own rules. And so these ads should go up. So the ACLU is right on that issue. Okay. Now, let's talk about everything wrong with this case. Because the first thing is going back to this ad, there's a lot wrong with it. Let's talk about what's wrong with it. This is a famous painting by a guy named Henry Bruckner. and he painted George Washington kneeling in prayer. The problem with that ad is that that never happened. I'm going to read you something. This is from Andrew Seidel's book, The Founding Myth. I'm going to blow this up so you can see it a little bit. For all the painting's ubiquity, there's no historical evidence to support the tale that Washington prayed like that. Priest Mason Weems designed the story to portray a devout Washington, but historical facts tell us of a different Washington. He was a man of little or no religion with a strong character that, had he been religious, would have prevented showy religious displays. On the rare, I'm going to skip ahead here. If he was religious, Washington was exceedingly private about those beliefs. Whoops, there we go. Even in personal letters and papers, the ostentatious show Weems invented is simply not in keeping with Washington's strong, silent character. So the idea here is, look, this idea that Washington was the sort of dude who prays to Jesus in public, posing while someone paints him, BS. That never happened. That's not who Washington was. That makes absolutely no sense. The other thing, and I'm sure some of you have made this connection already in the comments, and this is the part that really bothers me, is that Wall Builders, the group that those ads were directing you toward, is an organization run by a guy named David Barton. And Barton is famously a liar. Like, famously a liar. He uses Wall Builders to spread lies about the founding fathers. That's his whole jam. He's been doing that for decades. Specifically, just to give you an idea of what he does, David Barton once wrote an entire book about Thomas Jefferson called The Jefferson Lies. That was so full of actual lies that his Christian publishers pulled the book off of every bookshelf and said, we can't publish this at all, because there were historical details, I'm quoting here, there were historical details, matters of fact, not matters of opinion, that were not supported at all. So his Christian publishers said, this book has too many lies, we can't sell it. And then they continued to sell the Bible. Hilarious. But that's David Barton for you. He keeps putting out sermons that say, you know, this founding father, that founding father, they were all Christian. They were all conservative Christians. They all supported a Christian nation, that Christianity should be the foundation of our country. And he selectively chooses bits and pieces of like letters they wrote and things, documents, to suggest that they were all in on a theocracy in everything but the name. You know what I mean? So he lies. And it doesn't matter how many times like Right Wing Watch debunks his lies. None of that matters, because he just keeps lying, because the Christians who believe him just swallow it up because they don't know they're being lied to. So this is him. By the way, David Barton once claimed to have a PhD. Turned out that was a hoax as well. He's George Santos in the world of Christianity. That's David Barton for you. So going back to those ads that David Barton wanted to put up on the thing, should it bother us that the ACLU is defending a well-known Christian liar who wants to put up ads that suggest the founding fathers were Christian, or there was something about them that was Christian? Should that bother us? And the answer is, honestly, no. Lying that way is not a crime. It's still advocacy, and I still think the ACLU is right to defend Barton on this matter. We can disagree about that, but I do think the ACLU is legally in the right. Here's the part that really bothered me, though, because I was looking at the press release that they released about their lawsuit, announcing their lawsuit, and I want you to see how they described David Barton's group, okay? Because this should be a basic matter of fact, where they say what happened here. Here we go. Here's from the ACLU's press release here. Check this out. They said they are filing this lawsuit. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of Wall Builder Presentation, Wall Builders, that's David Barton's group, an organization advocating for Americans to understand their history and the important role religion played in the founding of our nation. which sought to advertise on the side of WMATA Metro buses. Like, what? What are you talking about? They don't want Americans to know their history. They want Americans to not know their history. I know that because David Barton lies for a living. So why are they framing this as Wall Builders is this fantastic group that just wants Americans to be educated? No, they don't. And Wall Builders apparently wants people to know the important role religion played in the founding of our nation. No, they have no desire to teach Americans about the role religion played in the founding of our nation, because the answer to that is very little. They don't want Americans to know that. That's what history actually teaches. David Barton wants to lie to them and say religion was at the heart of everything that happened at the beginning of this country. So the thing that bothers me is, and by the way, I know some of you are saying this in the comments too, it should bother all of us that David Barton's group's name is Wall Builders, when the thing he wants to do is tear down the wall between church and state. Like, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, that group could be called Wall Builders. David Barton is the guy trying to tear down the wall. Anyway, besides the point, why is the ACLU allowing Wall Builders to frame their own description as if they are offering a public service? They're not. Like, who wrote this press release? Was it Wall Builders? I don't know. Like, if I go up a bit, it's not just the ACLU working on this case. It also points out that the First Liberty Institute, which is a conservative legal group, is also working on this case. And usually when several groups are working on a particular legal battle, they share resources in that front. So they write the legal draft, the lawsuit draft together, and they pass it, circulate it between each other, and they all sign off on it. Same thing with the press release. My assumption here is that someone at First Liberty Institute wrote this passage. And by the way, they said something very similar in the lawsuit itself. But it bothers me that the ACLU did not correct that, because they could very easily have said, David Barton lies about American history. He spreads misinformation about the founding fathers. However, that is irrelevant here, because even liars who are advocating for something should have access to post their ads in this public setup. And the city of Washington, D.C. has no right to tell him he's not allowed to lie to people. Like, fine, use better language. But the ACLU could have said that. Instead, like, they just allowed the David Barton framing of all this to win the day. And like, why would they do that? Because you know what's going to happen from here on out? David Barton's going to use that to promote his own stuff. Like, David Barton can now say with complete sincerity that even the godless liberal ACLU believes that Wall Builders works to help Americans understand their history and the important role religion played in the founding of our nation. And he wouldn't be wrong about that. Like, he would be mischaracterizing the statement, as he always does, but like, at the core of his lie is a thing the ACLU said. And like, how does the people at the ACLU, how do you not know that your words are going to be twisted and taken out of context in order to promote something that shouldn't be said? There's a professor, a blogger, Warren Throckmorton, who I have a lot of respect for. He actually was the first one to point all this out, and this is what he wrote. David Barton and Wall Builders obscures and reimagines American history. He does not want Americans to understand all of their history. Sometimes he leaves out the history when he tells it with a bunch of examples. Sometimes he makes things up, like when he says Jefferson cut out and pasted end to end all the words of Jesus in a little book for Indians to read. Barton will even tell Americans that the Constitution quotes the Bible verbatim. Does someone who does those things really want Americans to understand their history? So if the ACLU must represent misinformation as free speech, then go for it. But must they lie to defend lying? Yeah, Warren's right. Like, again, the ACLU is right to take up this case. They do not have to play along with the incorrect framing that David Barton wants. And it's irresponsible of the ACLU to do that.